My project is on the biofuel ethanol. Ethanol is a renewable fuel made from various plant materials composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's made by fermenting the sugars and starches of grains such as corn, barley, sugarcane, and sugar beets. It's colorless and flammable and present in common everyday products such as alcoholic drinks, topical agents, pharmaceutical preparations, cosmetics, perfumes, and most commonly fuels. Ethanol was first used in 1826. Nicholas Otto invented the four-cycle internal combustion engine, in which he used ethanol to power. By 1862, it was heavily taxed as a means of paying for the Civil War. In 1908, Henry Ford used ethanol to power his Ford Flex Fuel Model T. In 1939, the Army operated an ethanol plant for domestic Army vehicles. Fast forward to 1974, Archer Daniels Midland was the main producer of high fructose corn syrup. During the wet milling process he used to manufacture the corn syrup, an excess byproduct of ethanol was made, which he intended to market. Capitalizing on the Project Independence initiative started by the Nixon administration, Midland began a political campaign to promote the use of ethanol as an additive for gasoline. Thus, the current market for ethanol was born. In 1975, the U.S. began phasing out lead in gasoline and replacing it with MTBE. Also in this year, gas composed of 10% ethanol was given a 4-cent per gallon tax break. The years 1980 to 1984 included the most ethanol policies, such as the extension of the ethanol tax credit, the increase in the ethanol subsidy to 50 cents per gallon, insured loans for small ethanol producers, price guarantees, and purchase agreements for the federal agency use of gasohol. In 1988, states passed laws demanding that all gasoline contain some oxygenate during winter to enhance burning of the fuel and reduce smog. MTBE was chosen until it was found to be toxic. Then it was replaced by ethanol. In 2003, MTBE was nearly phased out, increasing the use of ethanol. In 2005, the Renewable Fuel Standard, or RFS, was passed. This required a minimum volume of renewable fuel to be used. In 2005, the minimum was set at 7.5 billion gallons per year. By 2022, it was raised to 36 billion gallons. Most ethanol is produced by a dry or wet mill process. Made with starch-based crops, 90% of ethanol plants are dry mills. The process of production begins with corn being delivered to the plant, loaded into silos, and then processed in a hammer mill, grinded into a powder called meal that exposes the cornstarch. The corn meal is mixed with water, and then the enzyme alpha amylase is added, which helps break down the starch, creating a mash. The corn mash is held in liquefaction tanks where meal is applied to enable the enzymes time to break down the starch into fermentable sugars and reduce bacteria levels. Mash is removed and cooled before glucoamylase is added to help break down the mash by converting the starch into fermentable sugars. The mash is then put in fermentation tanks mixed with yeast and left to ferment for 40 to 50 hours. This changes the sugar to ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. The fermented mash contains about 10% alcohol. The rest of the mixture is water and corn or yeast that couldn't be fermented. The mixture is heated again at a temperature where alcohol vaporizes to separate the alcohol from the fermented mash. The alcohol or ethanol vapor is then collected and allowed to cool where it condenses to its liquid form. The ethanol is then passed through a dehydration system to remove any remaining water, which results in anhydrous ethanol. Ethanol intended to be used for fuel is then denatured by adding 2 to 5% gasoline, making it unfit for human consumption. Ethanol is widely implemented and used in very common everyday products. You can find ethanol in lotions, perfumes, tonic, beer, wine, gas, etc. Its use is only increasing each year. Ethanol leaves a carbon footprint due to it being burned with gasoline and the farming process it undergoes. However, ethanol does have a lower carbon footprint than gasoline. 1 gallon of ethanol produces 4% fewer emissions than gasoline. Ethanol also reduces greenhouse gas emissions by 32 to 62% compared to gasoline. Ethanol production creates job opportunities in rural areas where employment opportunities are needed. According to the Renewable Fuels Association, ethanol production accounted for more than 73,000 jobs in 2021, as well as contributed to $7.2 billion in tax revenue, $52.1 billion in GDP, and $28.7 billion in household income. Overall, ethanol is communicated as a positive source and is encouraged to the public. In order to communicate the use of ethanol to the public, the government put out policies and incentives in its favor, such as the Biomass Crop Assistance Program, the Biorefinery Assistance Program, the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Tax Credit, and Clean Fuel Production Credit. For policies, the Renewable Fuel Standard, Energy Independence and Security Act, American Jobs Creation Act, and Energy Act of 1978. Overall, I believe that ethanol has a positive impact compared to other fuels. While it still has its disadvantages, It is a great alternative fuel source compared to petroleum-based gasoline. Not only can it help implement the amount of CO2 being produced by waste, but it is also renewable and very useful in everyday life. My plan would be to make improvements on large-scale farming, such as get rid of tilling, which increases CO2 from the soil into the atmosphere, capitalize on using waste for production, and continue to promote it in gasoline.